Yeah. Okay, the Jentry Podcast. I know that you will be loving it. We here to break it down so that you start to understand your local government. Who are the leaders? Time to get active, do something about it. Dealing with jobs, the workforce, and affordable housing. Motivate and inspire. Elevate, take it higher. For the next generation. Knowledge is power for your community. Giving you the info that you really need. Time to make a change and a difference. Tune in, don't miss it. It's the Jentry. The Jentry Podcast. The Jentry Podcast. Making a change, switching it up.
Hi, welcome to the Jentry Podcast. Today we have an amazing guest. We have Adam Ducharme. He is the Economic Development and Tourism Director of Lake County, Colorado. But more than that, he is a father. He is a true outdoorsman. I'm talking about riding your bike in the snow with your baby in the back, outdoorsman, and also a cinematographer. I got a chance to look him up on IMDb. I saw a good number of shorts, anything from Soulmate to Inspiration. He's done some cool things. So he's had an incredible career, and I'm excited for him to be here. Adam, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jonathan. Happy to be here. It's living up at 10,000 feet. You do find yourself doing some pretty crazy stuff, but it's all part of the adventure. We always say that people who have the best time in Leadville, Twin Lakes are people who know how to read a compass and map, because you kind of got to, make a way for yourself up here. But, that allows for some of the best, most authentic experiences that you can have in life. So I'm pretty lucky.
Lucky indeed. And I'm not going to gloss over it. We'll hopefully touch on it later, but I've heard about a thing called Skijoring. So yeah. I'm very excited to learn more about what the outdoors have to offer. But just walk me through this. As I stated, it sounded like you went from an incredible career in cinematography, and now you're running economic development for accounting.
Sure.
How did that come about?
Yeah, sure. So, I was born in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. I was born literally in a hotel. So I've had hospitality in my blood my whole life. My family and I have kind of always been inspired by trying to direct people into how to have, the most incredible use of their free time. I just think that, when you have access and an opportunity to experience the ocean or the mountains or a culture or a community, that being able to share that experience with others is a pretty special, privileged place to be. And it's something that, I don't take lightly. I know how much I, gather from or gain from traveling around the world and being able to meet people and experience culture and experience, language and experience kind of everything and anything that a place has to offer. Because, in many ways, we're so all connected on this planet, and yet there's so many incredible nuances and differences that you get to see and experience. So I grew up in that world, and then, pretty early on, post-college, I decided that I wanted to go kind of bring that experience to as many people as I could. So I got involved pretty early on in my college career with cinematography and video work. And, I went to Northeastern, which had an internship program. So landed me a job with ESPN, and I was able to kind of start my traveling journey there, covering sports and then doing stuff for National Geographic and the Food Network and, a variety of companies. And it was really fun. I spent, 15, 16 years kind of living out of a suitcase and living on the road and getting to experience incredible places. And then when I started to think about, having kids of my own, I realized that I'd probably make a much better father if I was in the same country and state as my little ones. So settled down in a small town in the mountains of Colorado called Leadville. And my wife originally had gotten a job here, and then the community needed some videos made to sort of showcase everything that this place had to offer. And, I was hooked immediately. I was like, this place is incredible. And so they around that time, they decided they needed to have somebody focus on tourism and kind of the future of our community, economic development. And so I put my name in the ring, and it's been about 3 years now of doing that work in this community. And it's been incredible. Every day I wake up and feel privileged to get to promote a place that I love so much.
That's incredible. I didn't know about they asked for some videos. So it was a pretty seamless transition.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. trying to get to the airport when there's like a few feet of snow and the airport's normally 2 hours away and takes, 8, 9 hours sometimes with all the snow and road conditions. So I was very happy to start to, do some of the work that I had done locally. And it's kind of all grown from there. So, but yeah, there's so many correlations I always see or think about in terms of economic development and tourism and filmmaking, right? It's all about sort of shared experience and trying to resonate with what people are looking to learn, looking to have in their lives and learn about and experience, and just trying to provide opportunities to present that to them. So, especially in rural communities, we always say that economic development is community development. The amount of humans we have working on really critical issues is more limited, and the resources we're doing it with is more limited. So it really, truly is about sort of where do we want to get to, and how can we use the resources we have in front of us to get there. I'm a huge fan of the Strong Towns movement, and just a big fan of sort of doing what you can with what you have, the existing code, the existing infrastructure, the existing developers, and just sort of trying to take that big C community mindset into any and all conversation with your neighbors and your community members, even especially ones that you don't agree with, because at the end of the day, we're all still neighbors. So we got to find a way to make it work together.
That's spot on. And I think the fact that somebody in leadership is thinking about how the Big C community can work together, that's going to have a trickle-down effect. That's going to have a trickle-down effect, and everybody's looking towards working together and being connected. How does that kind of lead to what your strategic priorities are for Lake County, and how did you guys go about creating those?
Yeah, so actually we're actually right in the process currently in the first few months of the One Community projects. We are our strategic plan, or our long-ranging plan for the community is 10 years old, and it's basically reached the end of its effective life. So we have a really incredible opportunity right now to come together. And I think that a lot of times you can think of your comprehensive plan as just a land use document, and that's just for technical folks that are working in planning and zoning. But the reality is, especially in a small rural community, we have 2,800 people in Leadville. We have 7,000 people in our whole county. It's a critical opportunity to really think about, where do we want to head? We're a mining community. Since 1860, Leadville was literally founded in mining, and our largest primary employer still works in mining. We mine molybdenum, which is a steel hardener, but it's a component that's used in a majority of all clean energy products. So it really is on the cutting edge of the clean energy revolution. It is, you name it, everything from wind turbines to solar panels to a ton of household electronics. I mean, molybdenum is in a lot of things. And so they're a critical partner for us in our community, but also, extraction-based economies are a boom and bust-based economy. And there is a world, we always say there is going to be a world after climax. Climax is the mine. And so we always have to think about, who do we want to be when we grow up, right? Who are we going to be when the post-industrial reckoning happens to us? Because that is just a reality for most communities. Like I said, I grew up on the East Coast, and an area where we did a lot of our tourism development was in an old mill community. So there were a number of mills in this community, and they have, since been abandoned, and they were sort of leaching, chemicals and things into the river, into the watershed. And we engaged in about a 20-year process to clean up the facility and then rehabilitate some of them, and then, use some of the land as site location for the home of a resort now, right at the base of Loon Mountain. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you always have to be kind of thinking for the future and reinventing yourself. And the timing of this One Community project is perfect. We've seen a lot of changes over the last decade in Lake County, and we're well positioned to do this kind of effort. And this is the first time that this community is following the model that other communities like Silverton have done, where we are actually partnering our county government, the city government, and we're partnering with a nonprofit called Community Builders. And Community Builders is actually coming in as a partner on the project. So rather than just hiring a consultant and they give you a plan on a page and it sits on a shelf. They're actually involved in the process. It's like a 16, 18-month engagement, and then they will be involved afterwards to make sure that implementation is happening. So, for us, a lot of our strategic initiatives when it comes to economic development are focused on infrastructure improvements. Aging infrastructure is a huge problem, especially when you're in a traditional mining community that's been around since 1860. Fun fact, all the houses in Leadville have the date of 1888 as the date that they were built, the date of construction, because that's the year that the courthouse burnt down. And when it was rebuilt, they just reassigned everyone's house to being having been built in 1888. But many of the houses, mine included, was built, maybe 15, 10 years before that. So as you can imagine, with a lot of these old houses comes, aging infrastructure. So there's a lot of issues with copper pipes and just a lot of issues that come with sort of having your infrastructure grow and shrink based on, the health and prosperity of the mine and sort of the extraction-based economy. At one point in Leadville, there were 40,000 people living here. So for a community of 2,800, that feels pretty tight. I cannot begin to imagine what it was like when there were 40,000 people living in Leadville. But, it was in the running to be the capital of Colorado for a while, just because there was so much mining activity happening here and so much wealth generation happening here. Again, we're in a very different place in 2025, and we're really, really focused on, we call it the three legs of the stool. So we have that sort of access to mining and sort of our mining heritage. We have tourism, and then we have things like manufacturing, light manufacturing, and industrial. And those three things, over time, we're really looking to sort of bolster our efforts in manufacturing. And, we have the opportunity to do high altitude testing here. So that's something we've been looking a lot at, being at 10,000 feet, we get a lot of interest from folks who need to, study, the impacts of the type of weather and the type of altitude we have. They want to be able to study, long-term applications for things like renewable energy at grid scale and things like that. So we are sort of looking at a lot of future tech and looking at a lot of smart design and how we think about the future of our economy, as well as keeping our partnerships really strong with Freeport-McMoRan, the Climax Mine, and some of our largest employers in the community.
That's incredible. You said a few things that really caught my interest. One is, I think, like you said, with the one community, it's perfect timing right now. It's you guys can truly talk to people, understand what we need, figure it out together, because this next stretch, it sounds like it's pretty pivotal. You brought up, I believe it was like a nonprofit named Community Builders. I'd love to kind of touch on that. You shared how it's a little different. I've worked with consultants on projects to redo strategic growth plans, especially. But you were saying it's a little bit more hands-on. Is there more of a partner? I'd love to hear how you are partnering with a nonprofit and the county to really figure out what the next steps for Leadville and for Lake County are.
Yeah. So Community Builders is a nonprofit that is based in Colorado, and they've done this model before, like I said, in Silverton. And actually, there's a New York Times article that you can look up about how they were able to, there was a lot of sort of, let's just say, discontent or sort of a lot of varying opinions about the future and the direction of Silverton as a community. And Community Builders was able to come in with their approach where, like I said, they actually are going after grant funding. They have financial skin in the game to be able to provide Silverton with a plan and now provide Lake County, Leadville with a plan that actually creates, tangible benefits for the community and kind of helps us create the future of our community. So we're in the first phase of that, which is started in about November, and it's going all the way through to March, where basically no stone unturned. Like, they are engaging with absolutely every single nonprofit, absolutely every single Elks Club organization. They're at the senior center. They're talking to Líderes, which is like our leading Latina advocacy group in town, and obviously meeting with all, every member of every elected official, every member of our sort of business community, our Chamber of Commerce, our Economic Development Corp, things like that, and just trying to gain as many perspectives as possible and then put together based on the Venn diagram of overlapping priorities, identify the, 4 or 5 key priorities or key things that we should focus on in terms of future planning and how we think about land use. Lake County is a little bit unique in the fact that 76% of our community is open space. So, much of it is U.S. Forest Service land, BLM land that is protected under conservation easement, things like that. So we have a lot of access to open space, but it does make economic development and kind of community planning a little bit tricky in terms of just, where are we actually going to build things, right? We have a big housing, workforce housing is a huge struggle. Just being able to create a tax base that's sustainable. Resort communities traditionally are pretty plagued with sort of you have the second homeowners who are contributing to the economy, but they're not necessarily contributing to the community in the same way. And we run into some of that. So, again, always trying to figure out how do we meet the community where we're at with the resources we have to be able to grow the best future possible for us. So, again, I think for us, in order to grow in the areas where we can, infrastructure is going to be a huge focus for us. We do have a special water district and a special sanitation district. So we actually have to be working with, we don't own our utilities. So we have to actually be working with partners to understand what their needs are and how we can complement and help one another go after federal funding, state funding, private funding based on development interests and things like that to be able to support some of our goals. But yeah, we have big projects. We're working on a master development plan for our airport because we have a municipal airport, but there's a lot of interest there. We're looking at building an industrial park. We have a few facilities that are interested in understanding how we could add some additional recreation facilities in our community. But, it's all about scale and making the math work when you have 7,800 people in a community. The YMCA model says you need about 15,000 in order to be able to support something like a community rec center. So how do we get there from here? And, can we look at, leveraging something like a recreation tax and things like that? So just, again, there's a number of priorities that are pretty pressing. We do have a hospital in our community. We do have a successful school district, but one that is facing declining enrollment because that's kind of an issue. We do have Colorado Mountain College has a campus in Leadville. It's one of the founding campuses for the CMC, Colorado Mountain College School. And their model is really fascinating. They're really interested in staying agile and sort of responding to the needs of the workforce. So they are not sort of your traditional liberal arts 4-year. There's only 70 students, residents on campus, but they have a few hundred people in their classes, and they're offering everything from wildfire mitigation to, pre-law. So it's like there's a variety of offerings for an organization like that, but being able to be plugged in with them and understand everything from avalanche science to, how we deal with getting more people involved and interested in the hospitality industry in an equitable way. These are all things that we're kind of trying to work with our major partners to understand, where the future of our community.
Wow. You're articulating some challenges, but you are thinking thoughtfully about them all, recruiting partners, and I get it now when she said their skin in the game, like they're bringing the capital and helping create these next steps. And then what it kind of brought up for me is one of the issues that when I talk to people often, I hear people trying to match the life stages of a community with the infrastructure, housing, childcare, workforce development. How are you all kind of looking at that? Because it's very, as you know, I know I'm preaching to the choir. When you're fresh out of college, and even if you are able to get the perfect job, whether it was pre-law, fire, rescue, you have the job and you need housing, and then you find the partner, and then you have children, and then you want a little bit of bigger house, you want maybe a longer driveway, and then you get freedom, and then your family, your children leave the house, and you might retire. So how are you kind of working to balance that entire life cycle?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge issue, right? I think that, on a macro scale, um, unfortunately, we have uh, a huge gap between the number of houses that have been built over the last, let's say, 2 decades, and the desire or the demands for folks to want to live in a state like Colorado, just in general. Colorado has experienced a pretty remarkable amount of growth over the last 10, 15 years. And yet, in Lake County, for instance, where we live, the only type of housing asset that's been built over the last 15 years is single family homes. So that's not exactly sustainable, right? If you're not building multifamily homes, if we're not encouraging, and really, if we're sort of somewhat prohibiting access to building in-law units or building, ADUs, or thinking about duplexes, triplexes, making it super easy to increase that density and increase that missing middle, as we say, like it becomes a huge issue. I think a lot of people find themselves in rural places because they're looking for space, but most people are still looking for community. So that's a tricky needle to thread because, we have 2,800 people that live in Leadville, but it's basically 1 square mile. So you live pretty darn close to your neighbor. But, even though we have all of these massive 14ers and this amazing amount of open space around us, we're still in a community together, and we still need to be realistic and thoughtful about density and about the pressures that puts on sanitation and the pressure that puts on water and things like that. So we are definitely very cognizant and very thoughtful around moving forward over the next decade when we look at potential land use permits and just sort of applications that are coming into for future development. We really want to make sure that there's a good mix of things that are being thought through. Again, it can't just all be market rate single family homes. So we're vertical on 3 sort of affordable housing or workforce housing related projects. And we do have something called the accommodations tax in the city of Leadville. So we have a sort of traditional 2% lodging tax within the county, but within the city of Leadville, anyone that stays in an accommodation in the city of Leadville, they're charged a 5% tax, and 3% of that 5% goes towards our regional housing authority. And the regional housing authority is made up of staff and a board that is focused on trying to create, again, a more sustainable pipeline for people to be in Lake County longer term. So, we have, I think, in the next year, we're going to have between 60 and 70 units that will be tied to AMI and provide an opportunity for the workforce and for people who, truly have been in this community for a while to focus on and hopefully, make home ownership a reality for themselves, and then be able to just be more ingrained in the community. I know that in the past year or so, we've started to see an anecdotal influx of some remote workers, some folks who have the flexibility of not having to go into a job, so they can actually, go into an office every day. So they can choose to live up in, kind of a mountain community. And these are the folks who are that, again, 35 or 30 to 45 and interested in having kids, interested in getting involved in a community, interested in laying roots. So we're really trying to focus on, making sure that our school district is strong, that our access to healthcare, our access to, all the little fringe benefits that people really enjoy. Again, a recreation center is sort of top of the priority list for a lot of people. We had a pool that operated for years in this community, and it had to close down past its usable life. So at this point, we need to rethink that. But those types of things, people being able to have a place where your kids can learn how to swim and where you can go to the gym and things like that, those things are, again, it's not a need, but it really does make an influence on your overall life decision when you're talking about raising a family.
I think that's so important. Economic development directors across the nation are so focused on quality of life now. It may not have always been that, maybe like 10, 15 years, but now it's quality of life is so important. And I'm happy to hear that you guys are both maintaining people in the community, but also gaining people in the community, like those remote workers. One thing that brought in mind, what's the partnership like with, I believe their name was Climax, the mine. How
Yep.
has that been? Like, how have they been a partner with you guys through what is changing, but also you guys are, you're providing the educated workforce. You guys are doing a lot for them. And how's that
Sure.
partnership? Been?
Yeah, I mean, I actually sit currently in the visitor center that is a public-private partnership with Climax and with Freeport-McMoRan. So we sort of had to vacate our old visitor center based on just a number of factors that made it hard for us to stay in that space. And when I was on the search, 3 years ago for where is a place that would be ideal for the visitor center, I had always dreamed of this commercial space in the old bank building on Harrison Avenue. So for anyone that's not familiar, Harrison Avenue is our historic core in downtown Leadville. There are no formula businesses allowed on Harrison Avenue. So Harrison Avenue is made up of a bunch of old, really old storefronts that kind of has that old West feel to it. And all the shops on Harrison Avenue are kind of an embodiment of entrepreneurship and kind of that old West and that small business, acumen. Colorado is 99% entrepreneur-based businesses. Colorado is really kind of steeped in the tradition of folks who want to try and make a business happen. And this old bank building, which was literally the main bank when the mining heyday was happening here, there's this incredible, 360 view with the windows, look out onto Harrison Avenue and onto Mount Massive and Mount Elbert, the two highest 14ers in the Rockies. And I always had thought to myself, if we could have our visitor center in there, that would really, change the dynamic and allow us an incredible platform to be able to talk to people about Leadville Twin Lakes. And it just so happened that that opportunity came available about a year and a half ago. And, I started a conversation with Climax, and within 6 months, they had fully renovated the entire space to be a welcome center for Visit Leadville Twin Lakes. So it was an incredibly beneficial partnership. Climax actually has an office and has their community relations person staffed in the visitor center with us. So it's just wonderful. We get a lot of people come in who want to know about the mining history, want to know about what that big thing is on the top of Fremont Pass. And we have, in-house expertise, and they're an incredible partner. I think at the end of the day, they want and need this community to exist and to thrive just as much as we do. Over the last few years, they have staffed from about 300 people up to, their goal is 500 FTEs working at Climax Mine. They are in a position where they want our success nearly as much as we do. And so they're going to do everything in their power to help us, not only for the eventuality of the mill not processing molybdenum anymore, but just having a thriving community that their employees are really excited to live in and work in. And actually the general manager who, is in charge for Freeport-McMoRan of the Climax mine, as well as the Henderson mill and mine, which is also in Colorado, he lives, he and his wife bought a house in Leadville. So they're members of the community and they're just as much in it as we are. So, her background is in education. And so being able to have those kind of pillars of the community that sort of are living and breathing, hey, it'd be great if Safeway had more of this stocked, at our grocery store. Like they're aware of the same issues that we are and they're invested. So, again, I'm a big proponent. 30% of our revenue for Lake County government comes from the proceeds and the assessed land value of the mine. But, right behind it at about 28% of our economy is all of the commercial activity associated with tourism. We're sort of hand in hand, and we're kind of trying to work through these issues together. And I'm very grateful for that partnership, because again, the rising tides raise all ships. If you take the mindset of us versus them, or it's this thing versus that thing, you're all going to lose, because division is, the quickest way to lose sight of what's important.
That's a great partnership story. I think, well, I know I've seen situations in which it was very us versus them, and they're taken away from the community. But no, that seems like the mind not only is giving a lot, but they're benefiting so much from you guys having a strong community. And it seems like the members and the leadership even are in the community and of the community, down to as minute as what's stocked in the Safeway, like that. That's somebody that's in the community.
Yep,
So
definitely.
that's incredible. Now on that, one of the pillars of the three-legged stool was tourism, and you guys are around some pretty incredible tourism spots there in Colorado. Can you kind of speak to the tourism specifically in Leadville? And while we're on this, you gotta tell me what skijoring is.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I mean, I'll start there. I mean, skijoring is the reason why I live in Leadville. 10 years ago, I got an opportunity. My girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, she said, we're going to go up to, we were living in Denver, and she said, we're going to go up to Leadville for the weekend, and, we're going to go see some horses. And I had no idea what she meant. I show up in this town that I'd never been to before, and we show up on a Friday night, and the entire main commercial strip, the entire main downtown, which is also the highway, was completely closed down, and it was covered in snow. And they were grooming the snow, and I was so confused. Turns out it was this event known as Skijoring. It was started in 1949, and it came from an event that is traditionally Scandinavian, but up here in Leadville, they decided to just take it to another level because that's like what happens here so often. So there was a guy in town who had some really strong horses, and then there was another guy in town who said he could ski anything. And so they basically created this track right down Harrison Avenue where you start on one end of the avenue, and a horse and a rider go as fast as they can down the main drag while pulling behind them a skier who hangs onto a rope. And then that skier has to use a stick to catch as many rings as they can that are hung up along the side of the road. And then there's also 3 ski jumps down the road as well. So you have to kind of ski, grab rings, go off ski jumps, and try and stay up. And the whole ride lasts on average 15 seconds. And it's about how fast you do it and how many rings you catch. It is wild. It is truly... It's the first weekend in March, and it's all weekend long. Start on Friday night, where there's actually a Nordic skiing race and a fat bike race that goes all throughout the community. And then Saturday and Sunday are just wall-to-wall skijoring races. There is a pro division. There's an open division for folks who want to try their hand at it. And then there's actually a kids division as well. So little kids can get pulled behind a snowmobile to sort of get the feel for what it's like. And it's a riot. It's a blast. So yeah, I mean, we have such a long winter here that we try and come up with as many fun ways to get outside as possible. We host the Fat Bike World Championships here. We have a qualifying Nordic event called the Leadville Low Pit. That's actually this coming weekend. And that's a Nordic skiing race there's a 4K, a 22K, a 10K, a 5K, and a 1K for the kids. So sort of something for everyone. And it's a lot of fun. Again, people get dressed up in costumes. I mean, most things that happen here in Leadville have sort of a silliness component to it. We have Boom Days in the summer, which celebrates our mining heritage. And where literally people take pump jacks, like old school pieces of mining equipment, and try and drill as many precise holes into a piece of rock as they can over a given time. There's competitions where people have to shovel as many rocks into an ore cart as they possibly can in a given time. There's motorcycle competitions. It's a whole weekend of sort of mining and Western culture heritage. Obviously we have the Leadville 100. Those are kind of internationally renowned now. We have like a 2-year waiting period for folks who want to come and do that event. And that's actually a series of 9 different events that happen throughout the summer, but they culminate in the big 100 mountain bike and the big 100 run. I'm going to attempt the mountain bike for the first time this year. So we'll see how that goes. I say attempt because, you you can be well trained, and if the weather is crappy or you just have a bad day and take a fall, it's 11 hours on a bike there's a lot of bad things that could happen. So, but yeah, in general, there's just a variety of sort of outdoor activities. We have one of the larger concentrations of wilderness area, in the Rockies in this area. So a lot of access to, 14ers, the two highest 14ers. So a lot of people who are interested in climbing 14,000 foot peaks, the two largest ones are in Lake County. We have Goldwater fly fishing. We have snowmobiling. We have kayaking and canoeing and whitewater rafting. And then our heritage. I mean, we have the Camp Hale National Monument that was newly designated as a national monument a few years ago. That's absolutely beautiful. We have two trail systems, the Colorado Trail and the Colorado Trail and the Continental Divide Trail that run through Lake County. We also have we have a tourist train that actually runs an old school locomotive that runs in the summer and the winter from downtown Leadville up to the top of Fremont Pass. And, it's a Polar Express train in the winter, and just a really incredible ride in the summer. And yeah, I mean, I could go on and on and on. Obviously, our mining history, the National Mining History Museums here, Turquoise Lake and Twin Lakes are just two of the most incredible sort of experiences for camping and fishing and stand-up paddleboarding and all the things. So it really is, a playground. And we have Ski Cooper, which is our own ski mountain, and that's just within Lake County, and Lake County is tiny. So right around us is Aspen, Vail, Copper, Breckenridge, A Basin, Keystone. We have all these incredible world-class resorts that are all about a 20 to 30-minute drive from us. So we always say that, like, this is the best base camp for any kind of adventure you could ever want. So it's a pretty fun place to get to sort of promote and think about the future of. We, like I said, with our history and given our altitude, there's kind of a little bit of a gritty nature to the community and to the society. There's definitely a lot of stick-to-itiveness. There's a lot of third, fourth generation mining families who've lived up here for generations and are, hardy stock and just willing to do whatever it takes to make things work. And that, I think, contributes a lot to that Big C community, where people are willing to put their heads together and just, get down to work and figure it out.
Sure. Your passion comes through once you started talking about the outdoors. So
yeah,
I love it. And I feel like I got to see a lot of it. You guys' website is incredible. So I have to ask, did you have a hand in doing some of those videos and in the shooting?
Yeah. That's all my work. So
it makes sense. Yeah, I was looking, I was like, wow, this is one of the better websites I've ever taken a look at. I felt like I was there.
Yeah. Again, trying to create an experience for people and give a sense of what they can come check out. That's always been my thought is, less is more, but just let the place speak for itself. So, it's been an incredible 3 years of doing this work, and there's just so much more work to do, but every day is really exciting and kind of a new conversation and kind of a new set of dynamics. And that will keep me passionate about it for the rest of my career, I'm sure.
One is going to be on the challenge side, and then the next question will be on the future positive outlook. But, I always say everything isn't all sunshines and rainbows. There are challenges that you can face as an economic development or tourism director, or you can say for Lake County. Is there anything that you would just snap your fingers if you could and change, or maybe just even something within your day-to-day work? Like, man, if I had XYZ, like that's, so I'm very curious how you would summarize any challenge that you kind of see.
Yeah. I mean, for me, if I could just up and replace all of the aging infrastructure, we would be in a much better place in terms of our prospects around future development. We're in a pretty good place in terms of water, but our sanitation needs are, from a aging infrastructure standpoint, are pretty monumental. So, snapping my fingers would probably involve getting $18 million on hand today, and being able to just make all the necessary upgrades to not only sort of deal with, applications we have in front of us for development, but also future proof ourselves a little bit. Because, again, wastewater in these rural places, what ends up happening is people end up creating metro districts, and then you have decentralized sanitation facilities. And that's really scary, especially from a disaster mitigation standpoint. If we ever had issues with the grid, it becomes scary to think about multiple locations where there could be sanitation disasters happening. So that would be huge. And then, for me personally, I would really, really love to see more of our workforce working in Lake County. We have a pretty substantial amount of our workforce that works in all of our much more affluent neighboring communities because the job prospects there are just higher paying and a little more consistent. So folks who work in the trades, if you can work on a $10 million renovation, or you can work on a $750,000, like duplex here in Leadville, you're more likely than not going to choose the $10 million project in Aspen, because that's going to give you more money, more work, not longer work. So I would love for us to be able to just provide more and more opportunities locally to try and draw our workforce in, because the county has traditionally been considered a bedroom community for the surrounding resort communities. And that could be a tough label to shake, right? When you're considered the sort of affordable place where nothing really happens inside of it. But the reality is that is not true. And we do have a lot of needs, and it is very hard to find trades folks that can make it work in Lake County when there's so many shiny objects just over the hill, so to speak.
I think that does bring up one more thing for me. How are you, or what tools are you using to bring outside businesses? I know, like, obviously aging infrastructure is an issue, but what tools are you using to bring in new businesses from to anything as small as we do building and permits and zoning quicker than most, or we utilize incentives like tax abatement, or you name it. So what tools have you seen have been successful?
Yeah, to be honest, it's like there's a huge issue for us. Right now, a lot of the growth we're experiencing is just natural pressure from the constraints of the surrounding community. So it's become so unaffordable, unattainable to be able to try and start up a business or grow things in some of the surrounding communities, based on just the costs of land and the costs of doing business in those other surrounding communities, that we get natural interest that way. But then other than that, we did stand up a URA, an urban renewal authority, to work on a blighted area. And that has seen some success. We do leverage consultants to help us understand, in a given area, what would be the best commercial or industrial benefit, what's the market demand basically. And we've had some pretty good warm leads, warm conversations through that. But then aside from that, a majority of, this community is pretty well known because of the race series. So we get some interest from folks who are interested in that, from all of our outdoor acumen, but then also Melanzana. If you're not familiar with that company, it's a manufacturing company. They actually hand make these technical outdoor layers, and it has kind of a pretty insane cult following of humans that are really, really, really obsessed with this layer. And you should feel free to do a little bit of research on Melanzana, because it is a business case study in and of itself. They make everything. It's all handmade. They source all of their fabrics in the US. They employ about 70 people, and they have an appointment-based system. So folks have to make an appointment, and you can actually only purchase 2 items at a time. And part of that is just that the owner and founder, he's kind of an Yvon Chouinard, Patagonia type person. His name is Fritz Howard, and he just doesn't believe that more is always more. He they're hoodies. They're basically sweatshirts. They make sweatshirts, they make pants, they make a few other things, but these hoodies have kind of taken on kind of a life of their own in terms of people's desire for them. And he is kind of always of the mind that he wears the same one that he made for himself in 1992, and he doesn't quite understand why people need to come every 6 months to get a new one. So he's, by setting up what might be conceived of as anti-capitalist, as sort of an anti-capitalist system, creates even more, that scarcity mentality creates even more demand. They currently have about an 8-month waiting list to come shop at the store, and the only place you can buy melons on is in the store. So it actually creates kind of its own gravitational pull in terms of companies that are aligned with that kind of ethos, that want to see if they can lay down roots in Leadville, and people that are interested in co-packing and manufacturing that sort of align with those values. It's pretty fascinating. A lot of it is just on the backs of these entrepreneurial minded folks who conceived of these businesses that are pretty darn unique and really in keeping with the unique character of our community.
Yeah, that's authentic. It's something that is truly themselves. So people want and like crave something that's real, and that's just that screams. This is really who they are.
Yeah.
One question, or the final question I have, is in the next 5, 10, maybe 20 years, it seems like Lake County is going to be shifting. Do we kind of see the vision of the county or the vision of Leadville? Like, what do you kind of see in the next 5, 10, and even 20 years?
Man, if I could answer that question, I would. I don't know. I wouldn't be working, and I could probably share enough resources to make it so neither of us had to work. But no, I think honestly, the root of why I do this work, and I think the root of why many of the people in this community are so invested and so active, especially in this one community project right now, is just the fact that, as cliche as it sounds, there are very few places you can go that I have gone and traveled to who are involved in tourism-oriented places, or, tourism and resort-oriented economies that don't naturally feel a little bit like Disneyland and don't naturally feel a little bit nerfed out, kind of a little bit like you can just show up and all your needs are going to be taken care of. And, Leadville is pretty unique. Leadville has a whole lot of character, and you kind of have to, know how to layer it, know how to deal with negative 20 degrees, know how to deal with, a couple of 100 inches of snow, but also just, know how to and have the openness to want to have a really good, authentic time. And I think that my goal, or my sort of dreams for this place, are that we don't, that we lose our sense of authenticity as slowly as humanly possible. I think that, again, not having to have yet had the post-industrial reckoning has sort of allowed for this community to have a little bit more grit and a little bit more edge. But again, the old Victorian homes and a lot of the brick infrastructure and just the old Wild West, I was driving home last night and there was 60 head of elk, just on the side of the road. And there was a coyote on the train tracks that I saw yipping. And it's just kind of a unique Western town. And, I think that change is inevitable, and you're either on the table or at the table. So I really want us to control our own destiny as much as we can. But I think that sort of hanging on to a sense of authenticity is super important to a lot of folks who live in this community, even newer folks. I think people who've only lived here for a year or 2 years, they came here because this place does not feel cookie cutter, and they would like to keep it that way.
That's awesome. I think leaving the people with authenticity and the true character of Lake County is a great place to put a period. How can those that want to follow the journey, see the beautiful website, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So LeadvilleTwinLakes.com is our tourism website. OneCommunityProject.com, I think, is the name of the project where we're working on our economic development and kind of community development efforts. And then, Lake County CO .com is for our county's website, and that will give a lot of really awesome updates as we move along through all of these planning processes. And for me, I am just so grateful that there are so many people who have lived here for 2 years and people who have lived here for 70 years. And we're all sort of at the table wanting to have these conversations now and wanting to sort of get ahead so that we're not staring down the face of another mine closure. You know, the mine Climax closed in 1982 and the population dropped by 90%. So this place literally became a ghost town, and we've literally been building slowly ever since. So I think we're at a place now where, you know, the community is thriving. People are raising their kids here, and we have this opportunity to sort of, you know, maintain who we are, but think through what the future looks like. And, you know, it's exciting work.
Excited to enjoy and watch the planning process, then the execution process. So
Yeah.
Adam, thank you so much for
Thank you,
being
Jonathan.
here. This was
Appreciate it.
informative. And for everybody, please go check out everything that Adam has. And once again, he is the Economic Development Director and Tourism Director of Lake County, Colorado. Everyone, thank you. Thank you again, Adam. This has been the Jentry Podcast, and we appreciate it. Have a good one.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. Take care.